The sun beat down on the dry Georgia fields as Vernon Jackson adjusted his worn cap and leaned on his shovel. His overalls were smeared with soil, and his wide frame cast a long shadow across the rows of okra. At first glance, Vernon looked like just another overweight farmer, slow-moving, quiet, and alone. Locals in the nearby town often joked about him. "That big guy with the pigs? He probably runs out of breath walking to the mailbox." They'd snicker behind his back at the farmer's size and slow gait, calling him the gentle giant. Few bothered to speak to him, and fewer still knew his past. But Vernon didn't care. He liked the peace. He liked his animals, the solitude, and the sound of cicadas over traffic. He had his farm, his dog Buster, and his own rhythm. And that was enough, until one evening when a blacked-out truck rolled slowly up his driveway. 3 men jumped out, laughing, tossing beer cans, and yelling nonsense. "Hey, Farmer Donut. Got any of that bacon ready?" One shouted, howling with laughter as the others followed suit. Vernon simply looked up, wiped his hands on a rag, and said nothing. They thought silence meant weakness. They had no idea who they were messing with. The engine of the pickup still hummed as the men swaggered toward the porch, their boots crunching gravel and beer still sloshing from open cans. They weren't from the town, maybe just passing through, maybe not. But one thing was clear, they were looking for trouble. Vernon stood at the edge of his porch, arms resting calmly at his sides. His eyes, however, didn't match the rest of his body, they were focused, sharp, and unreadable. One of the men, a tall guy with a snake tattoo coiling up his neck, tossed an empty can at Vernon's feet. "Thought we'd come by and see what a big ol' country cow like you's hiding out here. Heard you got some fancy tools in that barn of yours," he said with a sneer. Another chimed in. "And maybe some valuables too. This place is a goldmine, right? Big boy here doesn't need all this land." Buster, Vernon's old shepherd mutt, let out a low growl from the porch. Vernon didn't move. His voice came out slow, calm, but with a tone that made the air still. "Don't take one more step," he said. The leader of the group laughed and nudged his buddy. "Or what, big guy? You gonna sit on us?" The third man, younger and jittery, paused for a second. "Yo, maybe we should bounce. I heard stuff about this dude," but the others ignored him. The leader stepped up onto the bottom porch stair. "We ain't scared of no farmer." What they didn't see, what they never saw, were the subtle signs. The way Vernon's stance shifted, his feet grounding themselves in the dirt. The way his breathing slowed. The faint twitch in his fingers. For years, Vernon had trained in the harshest environments on earth. Afghanistan. Somalia. Hidden jungles and burning deserts. He'd been a Navy SEAL before most of these punks had even learned how to shave. He didn't talk about it. He didn't need to. They laughed at the way he looked. But they didn't notice the scars on his forearms, or the silent precision in the way he moved. And now, they'd crossed the line. The porch creaked under Vernon's weight as he stepped down, slowly, deliberately. He wasn't rushing. He didn't need to. Years of tactical training had taught him that the first move didn't have to be fast, just clean. "Last warning," he said. "Turn around and leave. Right now." Snakeneck laughed again and flicked open a switchblade, twirling it like he'd seen in movies. "Ain't nobody scared of Farmer Fatty," he said, stepping forward with a grin. "You don't scare us, old man." But Vernon's eyes weren't on the blade. They were scanning everything, the twitch in the guy's right shoulder, the way the tall one stood too heavily on his back foot, the nervous glances from the youngest. Weak spots. Imbalance. Adrenaline. Ego. He'd seen it all before. 10 years in the Navy SEALs hadn't just taught Vernon how to fight, it had taught him how to read. Situations. People. Environments. That was why he always won. And now. He moved. It happened so fast the men barely registered it. 1 second, Vernon was in front of them, the next, Snake Neck was on the ground, choking on dust, his knife kicked 10 feet away. Vernon had disarmed him with a single motion and used the momentum to send him flying into the dirt. The younger guy let out a yelp. What the? Before he could react, Vernon pivoted, stepping forward with the fluid motion of someone who had broken down 1,000 doors and cleared 1,000 rooms. He grabbed the kid by the collar and twisted, flipping him over his shoulder and straight into a bale of hay. 2 down, Vernon said under his breath. The last guy, bigger than the others, froze. Okay. Chill. We were just messing around, man. Vernon stepped forward again, calmly. No rage. No yelling. Just purpose. You show up here with bad intentions, he said. You disrespect my home. My land. My peace. And now you want to call it a joke. I didn't know, man. I didn't know who you were. Vernon narrowed his eyes. Exactly. You didn't. And that's the problem with folks like you. You think you can read a man by his belly, not his eyes. The man backed up toward the truck, lifting his hands. We'll go. I swear. We're done. Vernon stopped a few feet away and nodded. You're done, for now. As the 3 scrambled into the truck, groaning and limping, Vernon stood tall, arms crossed. He didn't gloat. He didn't threaten. He didn't have to. The lesson had been delivered. The tires spun in the gravel as the truck peeled away, disappearing into the dusty evening road. Vernon turned back toward his porch, patted Buster on the head, and sat down in his old rocking chair. He pulled out a pocket knife, a small piece of wood, and began carving quietly, just as he'd done every evening. Peace had returned. For now. But word would spread. And no one would look at the fat farmer the same way again. By the next morning, the story had traveled faster than the morning paper. At the local diner in town, the kind of place where gossip simmered hotter than the coffee, eyes shifted when Vernon Jackson's name came up. A waitress overheard one of the bruised men trying to downplay the whole thing to the sheriff, claiming they'd been jumped while just having a little fun on a farm. But folks weren't buying it. Jumped, the cook snorted. You mean by Vernon? That man couldn't jump over a puddle. That's what I thought, the waitress said, lowering her voice. But get this, the deputy said 2 of them had dislocated shoulders. One's got a broken wrist. Not a scratch on Vernon. The diner went quiet for a moment. Then someone near the window, old Mr. Rollins, who served in the army himself, back in the day, grunted and said, that boy ain't just a farmer. I seen him move like a ghost once, when a tractor caught fire. Pulled a man out before anyone even blinked. A new narrative was forming, right there over grits and eggs. It wasn't just that Vernon had defended himself. It was how he'd done it. Precise. Controlled. Like someone who'd faced far worse and didn't even flinch. That same morning, Vernon rolled into town in his old pickup. He needed feed, oil, and a new hose for the irrigation lines. Just another normal day. But this time, people stepped aside when he walked into the supply store. A few nodded. 1 or 2 looked away, pretending to check shelves. He didn't say much. He never did. Just paid for what he needed, thanked the clerk with a respectful nod, and walked out. As he reached the truck, he heard a voice from behind. Mr. Jackson. He turned to see a boy, maybe 17, skinny, wide-eyed, and awkward. One of the local teens who used to snicker when Vernon drove past with hay stacked to the roof. Sir, the boy said, swallowing hard. I was just wondering, do you think you could teach me some of what you know? Vernon looked at him, then at the scar still faint on the knuckle of his right hand, a souvenir from a mission overseas long ago. He didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, he nodded. Show up at sunrise, he said. Bring work gloves. And just like that, the myth of Vernon Jackson, the fat farmer no one took seriously, began to grow. Not as a man to be feared, but as a man to be respected. The next morning, fog still hung low over the fields when the teen, name was Cody, arrived at Vernon's farm gate. He wore a hoodie, cheap work boots, and gloves 2 sizes too big. He looked half awake, half scared, but determined. Vernon was already outside, splitting wood with a hand axe, his movements methodical and effortless. He didn't greet the boy with a smile or small talk. Just a nod. You showed up. That's something, Vernon said, placing another log on the block. Cody stepped forward hesitantly. I figured if someone like you's willing to teach, I'd be a fool not to listen. Vernon raised an eyebrow. Someone like me? Cody scratched his neck. I mean, folks talk. What happened the other day? They say you used to be, military. Vernon didn't answer. He simply gestured to the field. We'll start with something simple. Load that trailer with those sacks of feed. Then move those hay bales to the pen. No shortcuts. I'll know. Cody blinked. That's it? That's the training? Vernon didn't look at him. Discipline starts with showing up and doing what needs doing, even when it's boring. If you can't lift with your back sore and your legs burning, how are you gonna stand when things really hit the fan? Cody stared at the work ahead. It wasn't glamorous. No hand-to-hand combat. No drills. Just sweat, weight, and silence. But he got to work. 4 hours. Vernon watched, not just for effort, but attitude. How Cody handled frustration. Whether he finished what he started. When the boy's arms began to tremble and he dropped a sack, Vernon finally stepped in. He walked over, lifted the bag Cody had dropped with ease, and said, Pain teaches. But only if you listen. Cody panted. Did you train like this in the Navy? Vernon looked out over the horizon, eyes distant for a moment. Harder. In worse places. With less mercy. He turned back. But the point isn't to become a warrior. It's to build your core. Your mind. Your grit. That's what keeps you standing when everything else falls apart. Cody nodded, still catching his breath. By noon, the sun was high and Cody was cooked. Vernon tossed him a cold bottle of water and sat beside him under the shade of the barn. You didn't quit. That's a start, Vernon said. Cody grinned weakly. Thought you'd teach me how to fight. Vernon looked at him, voice low and serious. Everyone wants to learn how to hit. But the real strength is knowing when not to. That afternoon, Cody walked home exhausted, but something in him had shifted. The town's laughingstock was now his mentor, and Vernon, whether he liked it or not, had just started passing on more than strength. He was teaching the boy how to stand. Not just in a fight. But in life. For the next few weeks, Cody kept showing up, before dawn, after school, sometimes even on weekends. Vernon didn't go easy on him. There were no shortcuts, no compliments, no coddling. But there was progress. Real progress. Cody's posture changed. His grip strengthened. He stopped complaining when his hands blistered or when the sun beat down on his back. And Vernon, well, Vernon didn't say it, but he was starting to respect the kid. One morning, while they were mending a fence near the far edge of the property, Cody asked, "Why'd you leave the Navy?" Vernon didn't answer right away. He hammered in a nail, then leaned on the post, staring across the pasture. "Because I saw too much," he finally said. "Lost good men. Good friends. Got tired of fighting battles for people who didn't even know we were out there bleeding." Cody nodded slowly. "So you came out here? To grow vegetables and feed pigs?" Vernon chuckled, just a low rumble in his chest. Peace is earned, kid. Out here, the only things that break are fences. And when I fix something, it stays fixed. That's more than I could say back then. Just then, a sound broke the calm, tires on gravel. Both turned. A black SUV was rolling down the long driveway, slow and quiet. Vernon's jaw tightened. "Stay behind me," he said calmly, but firmly. Cody didn't argue. The SUV came to a stop near the barn. Two men stepped out, clean-shaven, sharp suits, government energy. Not local. Not friendly. One of them, a thin man with silver-rimmed glasses, stepped forward. "Mr. Jackson," he said, flashing a badge. "Mind if we have a word?" Vernon didn't move. His voice was flat. "I've said all I had to say. Years ago." The man smiled politely. "We're not here to talk about your past service. We're here because of the incident. The men you put in the hospital. Turns out one of them has a brother in a motorcycle gang. Not the friendly type." Cody's stomach dropped. Vernon's eyes narrowed. So, the agent said, tucking the badge away, "you might want to keep an eye on your place. Word is they're planning something. Retaliation, maybe." Cody stepped out from behind Vernon. "Wait, what?" He defended himself. "They came here. You gonna arrest him for that?" The second man, bulkier and silent until now, raised a hand. "Relax, kid. No one's getting arrested. Not yet. But sometimes, justice doesn't come from a courtroom. Sometimes it comes on two wheels at midnight." The agents turned and left, tires kicking up dust behind them. Vernon stood still, arms crossed, watching until they disappeared. Cody looked up at him, eyes wide. "What are you gonna do?" Vernon looked down at the boy. His face was calm. Too calm. "I'm gonna make sure this farm," he said slowly, "doesn't become a battlefield." He turned and walked toward the barn. "But if it does, they better come ready." The warning from the agents changed everything. Vernon didn't panic. He didn't call the sheriff or install cameras or tell neighbors. He just adjusted. That same afternoon, he walked through every inch of his property, the fence lines, the back trails, the tractor shed, even the creek near the woods. He checked his locks. Reinforced the barn doors. Rewired the motion lights. Quietly, methodically, he prepared. And Cody noticed. The workouts changed too. No more hauling feed or digging trenches. Now it was endurance runs through the woods at dawn, lifting old tractor parts in silence, practicing movement drills through rows of corn like they were alleyways. "Why are we doing this?" Cody asked during one of the exercises. He was drenched in sweat, breath ragged. Vernon looked him dead in the eye. "Because when trouble comes, it won't wait for you to stretch." The next few days passed without incident. But something hung in the air, a tension, like the land itself was holding its breath. Even Buster, Vernon's old dog, seemed more alert, sleeping near the door, growling at sounds in the distance. Then, one night near the end of the week, Vernon sat quietly on the porch, oiling an old piece of equipment. It wasn't a gun, but something that felt just as final, his old Navy SEAL-issued combat knife. The steel had been with him through more storms than most could imagine. Cody sat beside him, fidgeting. "You think they're really coming?" Vernon didn't look up. The kind of men who send warnings through third parties, usually don't bluff. Silence. Crickets chirped. Wind rustled the trees. "Then why not just leave?" Cody asked. "Call for backup. Stay somewhere else. You've got nothing to prove." Vernon looked out at the dark fields, then turned to the boy. "This land, my land, was the first place I ever felt peace. I've fought enough wars on foreign soil. I won't run from the one trying to find me here. Cody swallowed hard. And you, Vernon added, you don't need to be part of this. I appreciate the help, but I won't have you in danger. Cody stood up, clenching his fists. You said you were teaching me how to stand. I'm not running either. Vernon looked at him for a long time, then gave a single nod. Then we finish preparing. They moved through the barn together, quietly setting up fail-safes. Vernon retrieved an old crate buried under bales of hay. Inside were gear and tools from a life long left behind, flares, tactical rope, a night vision scope, and a worn canvas bag with seal markings still faintly visible. By midnight, the farm was silent again. But Vernon didn't sleep. He sat on the porch, knife at his side, Buster at his feet. Because he knew, if they came, they wouldn't knock. And when they did, they'd learn the hard way, this fat farmer was no victim. The clock read 12:42 a.m. when Buster lifted his head and growled. Vernon's eyes opened instantly. He hadn't really slept, just rested, still as stone in his rocking chair. He placed a hand on Buster's back to quiet him. The old dog obeyed, muscles tense, ears up. Then Vernon heard it too. Low engines. No headlights. They were coming. Not from the main road, but through the tree line in the east pasture, just like he expected. Smart enough to avoid being seen, dumb enough to assume he wouldn't be ready. He reached into the crate beside him and pulled out a small radio. Back fence, he whispered. Across the yard, in the dark shadows of the barn, Cody's voice crackled through. Copy. He'd insisted on helping, again. Vernon had argued, but deep down, he knew, this boy needed this moment just as much as he needed protection. If Vernon had to stand his ground, Cody had to learn to hold his. Vernon moved quickly and silently, using the darkness like a second skin. The same way he used to in Afghanistan, slipping through night raids like vapor. His boots didn't crunch. His breath stayed steady. From the tree lean, 5 figures emerged. Leather vests. Chains. One with a crowbar. Another with a bat. One carried something heavier. Vernon couldn't see it, but he recognized the posture. It was a firearm, probably hidden beneath a coat. They thought they had the advantage. They didn't know Vernon had already disabled the rear fence gate and channeled them exactly where he wanted. As they approached the barn, Vernon clicked a hidden switch on his belt. Boom! A loud flare exploded into the sky from a rigged launcher by the silo, bathing the field in blinding white light. The men panicked, shouting, eyes struggling to adjust. That's when Vernon moved. He struck first, sweeping in behind the one with the bat, grabbing his arm and yanking it backward with practiced force. A scream echoed into the night as the man dropped like a sack of potatoes. The next swung wildly with a crowbar. Vernon ducked, stepped inside his reach, and delivered a powerful elbow straight to the chest. The man stumbled back, gasping for air, dropping the weapon. From the shadows, a voice called out, "Get him. There's only one." That's when Cody stepped out from behind the barn, holding a slingshot, and let fly. Thunk. A sharp crack as a steel ball bearing struck one attacker right in the temple. The man howled and dropped to his knees. Vernon smirked. The boy was learning. The remaining 2 tried to flee, but Vernon was faster. He sprinted across the yard, yes, sprinted, like a freight train with purpose. He tackled the leader, the one with the gun, and disarmed him with surgical precision. The weapon slid across the gravel. The man looked up, blood on his lip, eyes wide. You're not just a farmer," he gasped. Vernon leaned in, voice like granite. "I told you once. You didn't listen." He stood and looked around. All 5 attackers, disarmed, groaning, moaning, lay scattered across his land like debris after a storm. Buster barked from the porch. Cody jogged over, still wide-eyed but beaming with adrenaline. "We did it." Vernon nodded once. "You held your ground." They tied up the men with heavy rope from the shed and called the authorities. When the deputies arrived an hour later, they didn't ask many questions. They'd heard stories. Now, they'd seen the truth. Vernon Jackson wasn't a local legend anymore. He was real. By sunrise, the attackers were gone, hauled away in the back of 2 sheriff's trucks, bruised, beaten, and silent. Not one of them spoke a word to the officers. They didn't dare. Cody and Vernon stood side by side in the golden morning light, their clothes stained with dirt and sweat, but their eyes calm. "You all right?" Vernon asked. Cody nodded slowly, still processing everything. "Yeah. I think I am." Vernon handed him a bottle of water. "You did good. You kept your head. You stayed sharp." The boy grinned. "I had a good teacher." Vernon didn't respond. He didn't need to. By mid-morning, the town knew. It always happened that way in places like theirs, news moved faster than fire. Word of what had happened spread from the diner to the hardware store, to the mayor's office and the high school. Everyone had a version, but only one detail remained constant: Vernon Jackson, the fat farmer, had taken down an entire gang on his own land, without a single shot fired. By noon, reporters were calling the sheriff. He gave no comment. But out at the farm, Vernon didn't care about headlines. He was back to work, repairing the east fence, picking up tools, and refilling the chicken feeders like it was any other day. Peace had returned. Not by accident. By choice. By force. By resolve. Cody sat on a hay bale watching him, still sore but filled with pride. "You think they'll come back?" he asked. Vernon paused, then looked up at the sky. "No. But if they do, well, they'll remember what happened here." Cody nodded. "So, what now?" Vernon glanced at him, his mouth lifting into the faintest of smiles. "Now we work. There's always more to build." In the months that followed, more kids came out to the farm. Boys who wanted to learn how to stand up for themselves. Girls who were tired of being underestimated. Vernon never advertised. He never charged a cent. He just kept showing up at dawn, training, teaching, and passing on something far more valuable than toughness: discipline. Confidence. Quiet strength. The man once laughed at, once judged by the way he looked, became the heartbeat of a community. Not because of what he could do with his fists, but because of what he could teach with his silence. And in the town's memory, long after headlines faded and whispers died down, one truth remained: they laughed at the fat farmer, until he stood tall. And reminded the world exactly who he was.